watching the ticker talk that we're going to do with Dave Landry today. It's good to have you. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Jeff Gibby. Dave Landry is going to be our guest today. And here's a nice, actually, I like this picture of you, Dave. You look pretty good in it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. A little, slightly younger, but
yeah.
Ray hasn't
Oh,
completely taken over.
I have a story about that. I was doing a webinar not too long ago. I'm going to say it was like last August or something. And it was a big multi-speaker that we host. And somebody asked, when's Jeff Gibby going to come on? And I'm sitting here speaking. And I'm like, I am Jeff Gibby. What do you mean? And they were like, well, your picture is horrible. Like, your picture is so old. And so I have an updated one just because I didn't want to catfish people anymore. So there you go. But this is a very nice picture of you.
Thank
So
you.
Maverick says your camera's working. So for some reason, I can't see it. Maybe because it wasn't working before. But in any case, let me read the legal disclaimer here. Today's demonstration is designed to instruct you on using Metastock and the accompanying software plugins. It's not a recommendation to buy or sell any securities, but rather guidelines to interpreting and using specific indicators and features within the software. The information, software, and techniques presented today should only be used by investors who are aware of the risk inherent in trading securities. Metastock, the Traders Forum LLC, and their employees disclaim all liability for any investment decisions by investors based on the use of the software, trading strategies, or any information provided in connection with the companies. Metastock, the Traders Forum LLC, and their employees do not endorse the purchase of a security, nor are they paid for the promotion of any security. No information contained in the presentation should be construed as investment advice or a solicitation to buy a security. Now, Dave, does it sound like I've said that a few times? Yeah.
Well, I reduced mine down. I show that one, of course, and then I reduce it down to a line that I stole from Greg Morris. He says all predictions. Somebody was giving a presentation about how they were predicting all this stuff, and he leaned over and said, "All predictions are about the future, and a lot of stuff can happen between now and then." He didn't say
Right, so,
stuff, but anyway.
cool. Greg
But
was
yeah,
awesome.
I
Uh,
get it.
or is awesome. He comes in, like, he's very, very retired right now, but he comes in
Oh
the
yeah, for
office
sure.
once a year. So, if you're just joining us, or if you found us on YouTube or something, be sure to like and subscribe. It helps a great deal. I cannot explain to you how much it helps. It's very, very helpful for the channel. Um, Also, if you want to join a community that's a growing community of traders that kind of share ideas, have access to a lot of education for free, learn about the markets. We have a growing community. We'd love to have you there at thetradersforum.com. Everything up there you can do. You can chat with traders for free. You can learn about the markets. There's a lot of education up there, and we do events like this all the time. So if this is something that you enjoy, we would love to have you here. In addition to that, to kind of just set a little bit of a benchmark for the event, if this is your first ticker talk, this is a long form podcast. We're just going to kind of chat a little bit. We might talk about the markets. We might talk about whatever kind of comes up. Think of it as a long form podcast. So if that's not what you're here for, watch one of our other videos, maybe. But that's what we're going to do today. So in any case, um, if you're watching us live in the Traders Forum, feel free to ask questions. We'll keep an eye on them. Maverick, thanks for the audio check as always. And that's it. Dave, what I want to ask you first of all is, I always start with this: is how can people find you? If they find everything interesting today, where's the best kind of place that they can go to kind of learn more about you, kind of keep track of what you're doing, that kind of
Sure.
stuff?
www.davelandry.com and dave@davelandry.com. On Twitter, I'm T following moron.
Okay. www.davelandry.com and then T following moron at Twitter,
Yeah.
right?
And
I'm just trying to.
dave@davelandry.com for my email.
All right, cool. Now, one of the things I'm going to ask you a little bit about. So you've been trading for. When did you start trading?
Geez. It was I would probably say early 90s is when I
Okay.
first really became interested in trading. And I think I went full time around 1995.
Okay. Was there any particular reason you started trading? Did somebody get you involved in it, or is it just kind of, hey, I want to see, let's buy a stock? Like, how did that kind of process happen for you?
I've always been kind of fascinated with the markets, and it just seemed like it seemed like an easy way to make money.
Okay.
And boy, was I wrong. And it seemed like you'd have a lot of freedom. And don't get me wrong, I love what I do, but when a market holiday comes along, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
much as I love doing what I do, it's I think that's what attracted it to me, the freedom, and it's a different kind of freedom. I can leave the office when I want, and but the markets are always open, and the fact that I'm doing my analysis every day, and I'm also doing a trading service every day. If the market's open, I have to be here. So, and I'm not complaining. I'm very happy to be where I am, but it's a lot different than it looks in the brochure, So
Right. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Well, and how would you say that it is different than kind of what it looks like in the brochure? Like, can you
well, the thing
quantify
is,
that a bit more?
when I say the brochure, I'm talking about like these people who buy all this YouTube advertisement and they make it sound easy, and you're going to make millions of dollars and just a few minutes a day. That's one guy says make $10 million in 10 minutes a day. It's like, no, it's not going to happen. And some other guy said 2% a day, and I did the math on that. You'd be a billionaire fairly soon, within a few years, and so a lot of these inflated claims and all that kind of make you think that it's going to be easy, and it's a lot harder than it really looks. Now, on the flip side of that, people make it a lot harder than it really needs to be. It's like when I look at some of my best winning trades, they were from the most simplest patterns, and they were so obvious that they were just right there. Something like a Landry light pullback with the you and I were just talking offline about the Landry light. So something like the Landry light pullbacks, you just keep it really, really simple. So
Yep.
it's but
Like,
the I think one thing, just real quick, one thing that I was not fully aware of, and I learned really quick, was the psychological aspects of things. And I I remember my first trade. I was still at a day job, and I sold a boat that I wasn't using, an old boat, obviously, for $1,000, and I bought 100 shares of a $10 stock. In the first week, it dropped a point and a half, and I was out 150 bucks. And I was doing okay with my day job. In a day or so, probably could make that up with no problem. But it felt really bad, and I wasn't so aware of the psychological aspects of trading. And that's why a lot of what I do, I talk about the psychology too. I talk about the patterns, talk about the markets, the setups, etc. But I also spent a lot of times talking about the psychology. In more recent years, a little bit more about neurology.
one of the things that I think I'm going to say that I've learned from you over the years is you have a really good way of identifying trend. And one one thing that I'm going to actually draw it on the chart because I think it's something that you could always. I remember seeing this on a postcard or kind of actually I think it was on your business card if I
Yeah,
remember right.
yeah, yeah.
But just to kind
I
of
also
draw
have
it
it
for you.
printed. I also have it printed on my arm. I don't know if you can see it there, but I had it printed on my arm.
Oh, okay. Here we got. This is what you would call an uptrend.
Yes,
This is what you would call a downtrend. Oh wait. A downtrend. And then if I wanted to do no trend, it would be something
sideways.
a little bit more
Absolutely.
like
Yeah,
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
this
Years
is
years
literally your
ago,
business card.
the big blue arrows. The years ago, back in 1999, I was part of a website called Trading Markets. We were one of the first financial websites out there, and I would draw, the markets were just going absolutely nuts, as you may remember. And I would draw these big blue arrows on the charts, and people who didn't believe the market was going up, although it was, would tell me where to stick them. But the only reason they were blue is because the paint shop program defaulted to blue, and I just would stick a big blue arrow. And Linda Rasky said something really interesting years ago, and it stuck with me. And I said it so many times, I stopped saying it because everybody thought it was me. But it was Linda, and she said, if you don't know where a market is headed, ask a 6-year-old kid, because they're not going to try to reason earnings or fundamentals or what the Fed may or may not do or did or et cetera. They're just going to say, well, it's going up, it's going down, it's going sideways. And I think that
Mhm.
sometimes it's really easy to lose sight of that mentality, especially, with a package like Metastock, where you have 1,000 indicators and you can create your own, which I've created probably another 1,000 over the
Right.
years.
And we've got
You got to
yours
be
in
really
there too.
careful with that.
Yeah.
What's that?
For sure. And we put all of yours in there too.
Yeah, I
So
appreciate that. Yeah.
no, no, we appreciate it to be frank. Something that struck about me a little bit earlier is like you said, hey, and I share this kind of feeling. A lot of times, there's all kinds of indicators that exist out there, and some of them are really, really complicated, and some of them are very, very simple. And for me, the better I can understand something, the better that it seems to work for me.
Oh,
So
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I
anyway.
think if you can't put a trading system on a cocktail napkin, and that's another one of the things I did that's a little quirky and goofy, is I
Mhm,
actually had cocktail napkins printed up with my complete sort of methodology around pullbacks on there. You want a trend, you want to pull back, an entry, a stop, initial profit target, and then a trailing stop. And I printed it all out on a cocktail napkin. And that's pretty much the entire methodology. There's a few things I do outside of that, but for the most part, that's the crux of what I do, the core methodology, as I call it, the core methodology.
cool. I just mentioned we had put in a few strategies into Metastock of yours. Can I ask you if you have a favorite trading strategy? If it is one of yours, and
Well,
which one it would be?
I look mostly at blank charts when I do my analysis. I'm looking at blank charts, but I think if I had to pick a favorite, it'd be a combination of my patterns, but the one pattern would be a Landry Light pullback, and that's just where I notice you have Landry Light printed on this chart.
Mhm,
When we update this indicator, we'll change the name from Daylight to Landry Light. But if somebody's using Metastock 19, this is called Daylight,
mhm.
and that's just simply lows are greater than the moving average. And you're looking for the market to rally, and you also want it to be in a strong rally, but you want lots and lots and lots of that Landry Light, and then you're looking for a pullback to a moving average, and you look to get long after that pullback. Now, I prefer it in individual stocks because they're a little bit more efficient than the overall market, but it can work in the overall market too. You could see, just happen to have it plotted. I noticed on the left side of your chart here, uh, you see what it says
Over here?
setup? Yeah. So
Yeah. This one?
that's the setup right there. I'll go a little bit to your right.
Mhm.
Um, and you can see the Landry Light, the lows are greater than moving average. And up top, this is just simply counting the number of bars. And for the Landry
Right.
Light pullbacks, I like a 30 EMA. Now, again, I like to use a blank chart, but I do mess around a little bit with moving averages, and I think moving averages can be useful. I like to see indicators more as illustrators because an indicator doesn't indicate anything. If it indicated something, if it truly indicated the market was going to do X or Y, then you'd own the world. So it just sort of suggests what the market has been doing and possibly will continue to do. So we know looking to the setup around October 21st or whatever, looking back in time a little bit, you could see that the market had been trending coming into that setup.
Right. So what, just to kind of talk a little bit about the setup, are we getting a setup just because we're kind of trading down below this moving average? Is that what's drawing it, or is it something else?
Yeah, you want a really strong trend. Like I probably wouldn't be super excited about this one, but it is technically a setup, and so
Mhm.
you're looking for uh, again a strong trend. You look at it, the Landry light can help you find that trend or help you see that trend, but then of course you want to look back to the chart and you want to look at the net price change like we just talked about. Draw kind of a sideways arrow or sideways line, I would say, but you can see that this market from let's say December 20 or September 24th or whatever has lost a little steam because this see where it says set up there. I don't know if you
Mhm.
can't see my
Right
pen.
here.
Yeah,
Right
set
here.
up, and you go
Yeah.
back to where it says trending. You can see over that period of time, the market had lost a little steam.
Sure. Yeah. What do you think that is?
The
Tough to
buyers
know,
dry,
right?
yeah, the buyers dried up a little bit, and right now we're wide and loose, and you can see
Uh,
there's mostly downside Landry Light. Uh, so this is not a good environment at the present time. And lately, I've been recommending to my clients, and when I do the market in a minute every morning, just telling people sit on your hands because this is not really that type of market.
right. I like to sit on my hands when it's just
But
shaky.
if you get a chance, can you pull up NBIS, Nancy
Yeah.
Boy, Indigo? And I forget what S is.
Sierra.
Sierra, very good.
Yeah, I was in the military.
Well,
NBIS, do I have it
thank you
right?
for your service.
I'm gonna say that that's right. Why? I'm just not finding it, but if it is a no, yeah, there we go.
It's an
It just doesn't.
IPO,
Oh, okay,
NBIS.
okay. It just hasn't been added to this
Oh, it looks
database yet.
different. Yeah, that one looks kind of odd.
NBIS.
Is that a daily chart?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, this looks a little strange, but the point I was okay. Maybe this is old. Looks like that's old data going back past February. It must be. In my charts, I had it as an IPO, but anyway. But notice that it did. It's kind of interesting here, and I'd forgotten about this. What do you call these? The setups in here, the experts. I'd forgotten
The
about
expert
the
advisor.
experts
Yeah.
that you guys did, and it looks like you did a fantastic job. And this is kind of exciting for me to see it again because I hadn't been using it, but it noticed that it had pulled back to the moving average, and I like the way you have that trending in there.
Mm,
So
okay.
that if you could enlarge a chart a little bit to get past that February 22nd, maybe get a little closer in, because I think that's some old data. Okay, there we go. That's perfect. Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
notice how you had this really nice trend begin to take off, and you could just eyeball that. And this was also an IPO. And you notice up top, you have the Landry light up there. And you want 10 to 20 bars, but you also want to look to make sure that the stock is trending. And you could see that it did take off nicely, and then it pulled back. And notice you have the little setup there. I like the fact that you got trending in there too.
Hmm.
And I haven't played with this expert since we designed it years ago. It's been a while
Hmm.
because, like I said, I use blank charts and then occasionally this Landry light up here. But you can see the setup was when it pulled back to the moving average, and then as it begins to as it began to rally back on, looks like that's around the 2nd of January, that would trigger
Yep.
an entry. And then so far we're still long that one. We may have gotten long a little bit earlier on that one on the actual pullback. But anyway, that's one of our positions. In fact, that's the only position that I have right now in the core
Okay.
portfolio because the market's been so choppy. We've
Yeah.
stopped out of a lot. But the
So
bottom
can I
line, go ahead.
go ahead? No, no. I was just going to ask you. So if you're sitting on your hands, what made this chart kind of stand out to you? Something that you'd willing to kind of maybe
Yeah, it's
let
a
your
great
pinky out
question. A
from under
couple
your.
couple things. I like the fact that it was an IPO. I know you've got some older data in there. It might have picked up the prior symbol or whatever, but it
Sure.
was an IPO. And notice that in from November to December, it really took off. And then
Hmm.
this is your first pullback. And right where it says trending, that's where it was beginning to set up. And then it also that's just the first pullback in an IPO. I call it an IPO hot IPO first pullback or something. But then it also went back and or continued to drop, and then it set up as a Landry light pullback, and it's really kind of cool seeing this again. I'd forgotten that this was a when did we do this about 15 years
Oh,
ago, I believe.
it's
But
been a minute. Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
cool to see that it's still working. I know I'm kind of geeking out here, nerdy, but
Mm,
I'd forgotten about those experts, so that's really cool.
cool.
It
So,
just caught my eye because there's two main patterns I trade with IPOs.
okay.
One is what I call a buy at B, as far as keeping things super simple. I'm actually buying a new closing high on day 5 or afterwards, and that's what I call a pioneer setup. And there's a few little caveats there. You want to make sure you have enough range in the stock, and ideally it's above $5 a share and below $30 a share. But other than that, there's not a whole lot to that pattern other than you're just buying into these new closing highs. And what you'll find with IPOs at a new closing high, like we are right now in this particular chart, you can see we're at an all-time high closing basis, right?
Hmm.
That's a really good thing in IPOs because everybody who owns the IPO is happy, and it's usually hard to short an IPO early in the process unless you're some sort of insider who launched the IPO, and you're trying to get more uh, what am I looking for? Supply, I guess, to
Hmm.
sell or whatever. But for the most part, you can't short them. So that's a great pattern to just buying into those new closing highs. And then your secondary pattern would be something like a pullback like this. That's the second best time to get into IPO. Now there might be a case where a stock is higher priced and you want to wait for that secondary setup. An example I use often the other thing is not to confuse the issue with facts, but years ago during the pandemic, ASO set up Academy Sports,
Mm-hmm.
and the original setup I didn't take because of the Pioneer setup, because it's a brick and mortar retailer, and I'm thinking, how can that be exciting as an IPO? But the secondary setup, if you go back about a year or two, maybe
Okay, here
right
we
to
go.
when it came public, the secondary setup there was really nice, and it's like I felt like I had to take it because it was let's see,
We are
way back
going
there where it
way
says
back. Yeah. Okay, so here I think is where it went public.
yeah. So
Okay.
so if you could zoom in on that, go way back and zoom in
Yep, I can do that.
that Q4 2020.
Okay. Here we go. Do you want more?
Yeah. So if you look at around I guess like October 18th or maybe the day before, that would have been your Pioneer type of setup.
Mm-hmm.
But in a case like this, I have a hard time getting excited about a brick and mortar retailer. But technical analysis is technical analysis, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to completely ignore it when it pulls back. And then once again, look, it made a Landry light pullback. And see, that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's just the simplest of patterns could work. And that's just absolutely, it still amazes me to the day. And again, I'm geeking out, but this expert is really cool in here. And
Well, good. We could get you a copy.
what are we selling this plugin for?
That's included with Metastock.
Oh, but
So
you can see
anyway.
it's a really nice. So it's free. It's a really nice pullback. We'll make it up in volume though. Don't worry. It's a really nice pullback to the moving average there, and I was like, okay, well, it's a brick and mortar retail. Ugh, what's the excitement there? But it is technically a setup, so I felt like I had to take it, especially since it was an IPO that was doing well. Well, I
Mhm.
didn't realize that people would get sick of being in their houses and run out and buy kayaks and exercise equipment and whatever they wanted to do, just get out of the house, and the stock took off from there. So that turned into one of our biggest winners, and it was just from pure technical analysis. And again, didn't take the Pioneer setup. The Pioneer setup you want to take in an IPO that has some. I normally say, what's the story, fad or glory? Like, what's exciting about this company? Are they going to? Is there some sort of fad, or are they going to cure some horrid disease or whatever? And the promise rarely materializes, but that doesn't matter in markets. If people think that they might do that, then there's excitement about the stock. But anyway, the setup was there, and the market. I guess the lesson here is the market knows more than you. And if you have a setup and it ticks off all the boxes, in this case, you had acceleration. You also had persistency, which is very important. That's when it goes, a bar goes up day after day after day after day. And mathematically, it's equivalent to linear regression, but you could actually draw a line through the bar. So you see that big red candle right where it says trending.
Mhm. This one?
You see you could draw a line going back. And the other thing is, notice it trades cleanly. It kind of bases along and it goes up, and then it bases along and then it goes up. So all of these things are very important. Yeah. So from like October 28th or so, all the way up to that bar there, notice that it just kind of, the bars just kind of stack on top of each other. That's one way of looking at that.
Gotcha. So when we're talking about the setup here, I'm just going to get a little specific. You get the setup here. What is your actual trigger? Is it when it closes above the moving average?
No. The trigger
Okay.
would be above. In that case, since the setup bar it closed on its low,
Hmm.
your entry would be a little bit closer to the high, uh, above the high, but a little bit closer to the high. If it
Hmm.
closed close to the high, you want that entry further away. So I can go back and look at the records. You can find the records, by the way, at www.davelandry.com/archives. So
Okay.
I'll go back and look at the records to see what the exact entry is. Just eyeballing it, you see that first little diamond
Hmm. Right
going back
here
a little bit,
where it
probably
says
about right
trending.
there. So I would guess on that green bar that first came up away from the moving average, where it first began to break away from the moving average, would have been
Hmm.
right around the top or the middle of that green bar, somewhere around that area.
This one.
And you could see it didn't do anything at first, didn't do anything right, but it didn't do anything wrong either. So my stop would be uh, below the low of the pullback plus some wiggle room. And I use fairly loose stops. And by the way, I've fixed a lot of people, so to speak, by telling them to loosen their stops, use
Hmm.
looser stops, and then trade fewer shares, and that way you're going to the odds of catching a trend are much, much, much better. But if you're using like a super tight stop, you're going to get stopped out on noise alone, and sometimes that might be, and that's not to go too far off into the weeds, but
You're
I've been
fine.
doing a series for the last 6 months or
This whole
so
series
called
is about the weeds. So, don't
I've been
worry.
doing a series lately called A Million Little Things, and that's the thing about trading is everybody thinks it's going to be this big old epiphany, and bam, you got it all figured out, and you're a trader, yeah. But the reality is, it's a million little things that'll make you a trader. Like knowing that you're going to have to give it a little bit of rum, and you're going to have to use a little bit looser stops. Obviously, knowing a little bit about money management, knowing psychology. For instance, a million little things. Just to get sidetracked for a second, is identify all the extraneous influences in your life and how it might be affecting your trading. And one of them was I did one on disruptors. We recently got a puppy. He's like, oh, I love the puppy. It's great. But we're not sleeping as much. So it's
Sure,
affecting
sure,
me
sure.
during the day and all. So you have to really work hard to kind of get to know yourself and identify these things. And since I'm often in the weeds, the other thing I would highly recommend everyone do is wake up every morning, and the first thing you do, write 3 handwritten pages. And I have a little digital notebook that I use that I absolutely love. But you could do it obviously on pen and paper. I did it for years like that. And it's a really good way of just clearing your head and getting the garbage out of your head and identifying all those extraneous influences that comes in.
Handwritten
And,
pages
and
on what, may I ask?
what's
What are
that?
you writing? What are you writing about in the morning?
You want to write about anything and everything. You don't want to,
Okay.
you don't just sit there like, oh God, I've got to
A
write
stream of consciousness is what
a
you want to
stream of
write.
consciousness. Thank you. That's exactly what you're doing. And just whatever it is, and just write it down. And the when you first get started, it's hard. It's the hardest thing ever, and very few people follow through. But if you could do it for about 6 weeks, it's as nerdy as I am, as crazy as I am. I actually enjoy waking up. That kind of gets me out of bed to get up and write and wake up my mind. And in recent times, there's a book by Quick, and I think it's called Limitless. I haven't read the whole book yet or listened to the whole book, um, but he talks a lot about how we're bombarded with all these different things. And I know I'm doing the weave, but the average person, and I need to go back and look at the statistics on it, but we consume more information in one day today
Oh, yeah.
than people years ago did in their entire lifetimes. And that's why we're ending up with some of the ADD, which I'm guilty of having, and other issues is because our brains are just not made for all this switching around. So where I'm going with that is when you wake up and you did a stream of consciousness, you get everything out of your head, you come up with some ideas, and then you want to stay analog as much as you can. Now, I'm guilty of checking in on crypto and checking S&P future sometimes, but for the most part, I try to stay as analog as possible, even if my phone buzzes with a text message or something. I'm trying to just get my work done first and then move on to that. But that little brain warm up is just a huge thing. I can't recommend it enough. And one other thing that comes out of it, and again, we're going through the weeds, but
No. I,
there's always something to worry about, right? So you write what you're worried about, and then you'll find out that 85% of it doesn't come true, or 90% of it, but the 10 or 50% that does come true, you just deal with it. And I know it's easy to talk like that because I'm worried about a lot of stuff right now, but it all seems to mostly work out, and that's one thing that kind of comes out of these pages. But anyway, I think if somebody was newer to trading, I would tell them, okay, do that for 6 weeks, and then let's get heavily into this. But it just do one pattern and just get your head on straight.
you made me think of a saying that I've heard and a quote that I like. Whoever said you can't buy happiness never bought a puppy. What kind of puppy did you get?
I don't know about that. I've heard the saying, "Money can't buy happiness," but I've never seen somebody depressed on a jet ski. Uh, my wife, when she was a child, had we recently had a black golden retriever. It was a
Okay.
mutt, but she was wonderful. And she
Hmm.
passed. And
Labs
my wife
are.
always wanted a purebred golden retriever, so it's a golden retriever, and she's wonderful. She's smart, but she bites the hell out of me. I'm covered in
Oh yeah.
bite
Yeah, yeah,
marks.
yeah. You got the baby shark teeth all over. I've
Yeah.
had that. It's funny. I have a golden retriever too. I have two
Oh
actually.
wow, wow, cool.
And yeah,
Are
they
you
just
where
go.
are you, Jeffrey?
Where am I? I'm in Utah, Salt Lake City.
Utah. How do I forget
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
yeah.
I would say
But
we'd have to visit,
you're
but that's a hike.
come on over. We know that we're best places for lunch. So, but yeah, let's see. I have two golden retrievers, and you're gonna love them. As soon as they kind of settle down a little bit and stop biting you, and they lose the baby teeth,
Yeah,
they're just awesome dogs. So
yeah.
Maverick wants to know what the origin of your butterfly pattern is.
The bow tie.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
the I noticed that years ago. I noticed the interaction between the if you want to plot the bow tie.
Working on it. Yeah.
Uh, Years ago, I noticed the interaction between a 20 exponential, a 30 exponential, and a 10 simple moving average. And Academy, that's a great set. You can see right there where they come together and then spread out again. And ideally, you want to see that off a major high and a major low, or a major low, I should say. And that's a transitional pattern. Now it's a little bit more involved because um, you're using. There's a few things that you need to know, like you're getting in early in a trend, okay. And there's always when you're a pioneer like that, there's always a chance of getting a gold, but there's also a chance of getting the arrows in your back, like the American pioneers.
Hmm.
But anyway, the pattern's really simple. The one on the left side of the chart, you can see the bow tie is when these moving averages come together and begin to spread out a little bit. And
Yeah.
this isn't a perfect setup here because it's a little sloppy. I like them when they come together a little tighter and look more like a bow tie. But I noticed the interaction between those moving averages. And if they're just kind of meandering back and forth, you're in a choppy market. If they're in uptrend proper order, which you guys have marked bullish here, that means in general the market is headed higher. Now there's some lag to it because it's a moving average. Notice that it stayed bullish because the moving averages were still in uptrend proper order over in September of 24 going into October. And then it flips over to the downside and then goes bearish. But the setup is just real simple. That's your trend indicator. You want a major high or major low, and you want that bow tie to come together. And you can see that on the right side, right around December, the bow tie, the bars are blue because you've got the bow tie to the upside. And then down below, you can see the proper order is bullish because 10 is greater than 20 and 20 is greater than 30. And then you just need a 1 bar pullback to complete the pattern.
Okay. Cool. Good question. Thanks, Maverick. Do you remember the first stock you ever bought?
Yes, it was Quantum Corp. It's the one I mentioned earlier, and it was back then I was a computer guy, and I liked I did confuse the issue with facts by interjecting some fundamentals to it. Um, but their storage was really tough. I remember if you had the old IBM PCs, most of them had like a 10 megabyte hard drive, and that was after you had floppy disks, of course. But and then if you had a 20 megabyte hard drive, you were like you were huge. You were like a big deal. And Quantum was making these little slip-in hard drives, which was the first company to do that I knew of. And I just was very excited. And I just thought that they were in the right place at the right time. And so I bought the stock. Had I known more about technical analysis at the time, I would have waited a little bit, and my timing would have been a little bit better. But I did initially, like I said, I lost on it, and I haven't looked at the chart in 30 years or whatever. But I would imagine that it might not have really been that ugly based on the volatility of the stock. But with that one, it did. I did end up, I think, doubling or more on that one, and then I ended up before long I was buying options on it and parlaying that a little bit. I don't know if not all of that was necessarily prudent, but it just happened to work at the time. So that was luckily, except for that point and a half hit where I thought I was devastated. the first week, it did work out for me pretty nicely. And from that point, I think I was hooked.
What is there a particular trade that you can remember that kind of taught you a lesson? And what was that lesson?
It's not since I'm only risking 2% per trade. I don't have a lot of those that stick out, but I do occasionally break my rules and know that I'm breaking them, and that stresses me out. One trade that I think sticks out early in my career was I came in one night after a few drinks, and I noticed that the pound and what other currency was it? I want to say the pound and the franc. I think it was the Swiss franc were rolling over, and I had a signal. Now that signal was probably there earlier in the night before I went out, and I don't know why I didn't see it, or more importantly, why I didn't take it. I think I saw it, but didn't take it. When I came in, I'm like, this looks like a really good short, and so I shorted the Swiss franc, and that was the night I got lucky on that one. That was the night that Soros came in and creamed the pound. I forget which year with that. That's probably like 1995, maybe. And then the next day, I went in and I dog piled in on the pound too. So it was a Swiss franc and the pound as shorts, and then I made enough capital on that to keep me living for like 6 or 8 months or whatever. So I was in business, and that was so that if I had to say any that stood out, it'd be like something like that.
Okay.
There's every now and then the it happens type of trade, like we just got a 50% haircut in a stock, so that one sticks out in my
Sure.
mind. Luckily, because we were only risking 2%, and even with the gap, and I'm actually going to talk about it tonight in the webinar, the total loss was only 2.6% on the portfolio. Now that sucks, to put it mildly, but through the money management, we were able to somewhat mitigate those damages. And the old hedge fund adage, "He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day," comes to mind on a situation like that.
Now, Maverick, that's a great question. Actually, this is where I was going. So you mentioned that you trade some forex, you trade some stocks. Do you trade ETFs?
I do.
Okay.
I haven't traded forex in a while. I trade
Okay.
crypto too.
Okay.
ETFs now, with ETFs, I'm not trading them. I was trading them more actively intraday, but I realized that I need to like listen to my own to
Yeah,
what
yeah,
I
yeah.
preach, and I think day trading is a bad thing to do. Now I will step in here and there when it seems kind of obvious with the ETFs intraday basis, but just kind of like an S&G type of trade a while back, I have a little system called the TFM 10% system, and I can give you the rules in a second here. It's really, really, really simple, and it's a market timing system for the overall market. And I did the testing on the S&P 500 cash, and it seemed to work out pretty well. And the idea behind the system was that to avoid the diaper change moments. That's what Ian McActivey used to call them, when the
Okay.
market just completely comes unglued. And so what I'm doing there is I feel like if the market is going to drop 50%, or just technical analysis 101, it's going to drop 10% first. So right at that 10% number, and I have a moving average in there too that I'm using as a whipsaw filter, I exit the market. So and then I enter when I have 2 bars of Landry light above the moving average. And then if you pull up the Qs with
Oh,
pull up a weekly Qs with the 50-week moving average, I can show you the
let me do that again. Hold
setup.
on a sec.
So I just for SGs a while back, I bought the Qs, and to my surprise, that position has ran about 65%. So that's been kind of a fun thing to do. I know I'm a nerd, but as far as trend following is concerned, and pure trend following has its issues. I take a hybrid approach in that I'm taking partial profits and
Which
trailing a
set?
stop higher.
Which setup did you want on the keys?
I don't think it's in this module, but we could certainly add it to the next one.
Okay.
It's just and I can give you the formulas for it, but it's just a 10% or 90% of the 50-week closing high, or 10% below that 50-week closing high, however you want to look at that. Okay,
Right.
so
Okay.
I mean, just round numbers. If you look at it 540, what's 90% of 540? Because that's
Uh,
our
I don't do math on the fly. I just embarrass myself.
46. Okay, so your sell signal would be down at 46, and if you could put a 50 simple moving average in here, and then
Sure.
change it to a weekly, I can show you the rest of it.
Okay.
But it's long story endless on your ETF question. So this is the one ETF position that probably the only one I ever remember holding longer term, and 30 in exponential.
30
Oh,
exponential.
I'm sorry. That's a simple moving average. You're right. 50, 50, and then change to a weekly chart. So it'd be a 50-week
Okay.
moving average.
Okay.
Okay, so there it is there, and then jump to a
Go to
weekly.
weekly. And then
So it would have to drop 10% and then drop below that longer term moving average. Now, what's kind of cool is, and I'm just kind of noticing this, the one at the bottom is the 50-week simple. There you go. Thank you for taking those
Mhm.
out.
Yeah.
Notice a Landry light going all the way back to March 23rd, and that's what's fun about doing these webinars. I know you want to party with me, but
Mhm.
you see a lot of things that you never really think about. But notice that not one of those bars, not one of the lows of that bar hits that 50 simple moving average. And I don't know if
Right.
we have the formula. I think the formula in Metastock is just for the 20 exponential. But if you would change that Landry light, I don't think you can do it on the fly. But if you would change it to the Landry light count on that 50 simple, you would see that you'd have what would that
Challenge
be?
accepted.
That's
I can
about,
tell you in a second if I can or not. Let's see. Expert
yes, that's going
advisor,
to be daylight.
properties. Oh, it's
But
right over here.
your the sell signal is when the market drops 10%, again based on the 50-week closing high, and then also closes below that 50-week moving average. So it would be it's based on a calendar week.
Okay.
Let's try that.
I'd have to change it in a few places
Yeah, that's
to
okay.
get it up here.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah.
But the point I was making is that notice the lows never touch the moving average, and you see that your first two bars of Landry light all the way to the left by March 23rd of
Hmm.
2023.
Right
Okay,
here.
okay, one bar two. So the second bar would have been your entry. You would enter on the close of that week based on the system, and I just I bought 100 shares for S and Gs, and it was the Qs were like $30 or 300, I guess, back then. And I'm like, well, let me just see what happens. I'll follow the system, and then I got lucky on this one, I guess, because it turned into a huge winner. And so far, it's ran about 65% from that low. So long story endless, ETFs occasionally intraday. I try not to do that too much because it is it can really suck you in if you're not careful. It's too much trading. We're also not wired to make that many decisions, which that's the neurology I touched upon earlier. But as far as ETFs, this is the one ETF I've owned. This is the longest I've owned an ETF, coming up on 1 year here. And until I'm stopped out, I'll keep this position on. I don't know if I'm going to continue to follow this mechanically because I am a discretionary trader. But again, I'm going to see it to its fruition and see what happens, and use it as an example of following a system and longer term trend following. And the drawdowns have been abysmal in here, as you would expect. At one point, there was an $8,000 drawdown on just that 100 shares. Now, when you look at forest for the trees, it's like, well, it just looks like a big old fat uptrend the whole time. But there's a lot of zigs
Mhm.
and zags in there, and that one hurt a little bit just watching $8,000 evaporate. So,
Sure.
but I've been using this as a teaching example about the good and the bad of longer term trend following. Your real money's in the longer term trends, but you can only predict the short term when it comes to markets with any degree of accuracy. You can't even predict that, obviously, but you have a good idea, right?
Hmm.
If you got a solid trend, and we take partial profits, kind of like a swing trade, I guess, pretty much like a swing trade, and then we move the stop to break even, and we continue to trail that stop higher.
Yeah, 8,000 here or there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Yeah.
What what do you think? You had mentioned cryptocurrency, and this kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
dovetails into a question Maverick had. But I'm just curious in terms of what you think the future holds for cryptocurrency. before I.
I'm, I've got to take off my trader hat for a second. I think Bitcoin has become legitimate. I think that there's only 21 million. Obviously, I think people are like my wife's always on my ass to show her how do I get the Bitcoin, because if you die tomorrow, it goes away. So
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
people are dying without leaving their keys behind or whatever, and that money goes away forever. Michael Saylor says when he dies, he's gonna turn his keys in, which is crazy, but God bless him. So I think it's a dwindling supply, and I think that a lot of people there's more and more adopters coming along. So I'm pretty damn bullish on Bitcoin longer term. I think $100,000. Everybody was fixated on that. And
Mhm.
shorter term, I think we're seeing a lot of resistance there. People are unloading and all. But I think once it breaks that decisively, I think it'll go to 200 pretty quickly. Now, that's just my feeling. I guess go back to a daily chart.
Sure.
Looks pretty good on a weekly, doesn't it? Look at that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So the other ones, the altcoins, I got to watch my language on those, but those are not that Bitcoin's not speculative, but those are so speculative. A lot of times in those, like I'm long Ripple right now. That's the only one I'm still long. Uh, I just buy those when they're going up. Like if Bitcoin's doing
Mhm.
well and all these altcoins are up 20 and 30%, I'll just buy the one that's going up the most. Now, once the market corrects a little bit, then I'll go back to the normal core methodology. Okay, where you play into pullbacks. But when these things are running, you could just buy them as they're going up. I just take a 20% profit target on them. And so I'll get in and I'll take off half my shares at 20%. And one thing I've been doing for S&Gs, and this is a very small amount, just as kind of fun type of trading. Not that trading should be fun. It's a serious business, obviously. But what I've been doing is just taking a little crumb, like $25 a trade, and put it into Bitcoin. And it, not that I want to hodl the Bitcoin, but it's kind of like a little. I pretend I'm getting a commission, paying a commission, I guess, on the trade and putting that over. And then like the Ripple trade, again, I don't know where it is at the moment, but I was nearing 100%. I have a limit order in there. It's been there for like 3 months at 100%. So when it hits 100%, I'm gonna take off another little piece, and then I'm gonna put that into Bitcoin and see if I could turn these altcoins, which I think are mostly BS, into
Sure.
something that's a little bit more real, like Bitcoin. But as far as the technicals on Bitcoin, I'm just kind of looking at this. If you draw your horizontal line, we're at what 99,000 and change, almost 100. You can go way back in time, and you could see that we were there. What was it, last November? Okay, so that's a sideways market for now, and that's it. I think you obviously have a lot of resistance around that 100K level or so. But I think once we get past it, right, and then you could go back to that weekly for a second. Once we get past that resistance, I think it's going to be clear sky. I think a lot of people, everybody's been poo-pooing Bitcoin forever, and then I think if it gets past 100 decisively, I
Yeah.
think people are going to have to, put up or shut up. But
Yeah.
that looks fantastic longer term. You can see we're just consolidating in here, and we could easily make a new leg higher. Now, keep in mind one thing, just a little side note, and I don't know who said it first. I wish if somebody knows, please let me know. But somebody once said that all asset classes will lose half of their value at some point in your lifetime. And I've seen Bitcoin lose half its value and all those altcoins, obviously. And I've seen stocks several times in my lifetime have lost half of their value. So gold, for instance, I've seen gold lose half its value. So just keep in mind, if you wanted to buy and hold something like this, be prepared to lose at least half of your money at some point. Now, hopefully it'll double or triple first, but
Yeah.
that's
Hopefully it
always.
isn't right after you bought it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But so that's one thing to think about if you're trying to, earlier you're asking like how do I feel? It's like I feel bullish, but just remember if you're going to buy and hold, or buy and hope as I call it, be prepared to lose at least half your money. And one thing people forget, and I was just talking with one of my clients about this a few days ago. Nasdaq Composite lost over 70% of its value in 2000,
Mhm.
and
Oh, yeah.
that's people, because like I'll show examples going back to the depression. It's like, well, that was the depression. What about now? It's like, okay, well, Nasdaq
There's
Composite
other.
lost
Yeah.
70%. So people forget the markets go down, and they go down substantially, obviously.
And they go quickly. Like what they take the stairs up and the elevator down, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was also I made that up, Dave. Just kidding. I heard it somewhere. I don't know who said it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
do you have so would it be fair based on kind of that assessment that Bitcoin is your favorite crypto?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's you got to be careful not to listen to too much Michael Saylor, but he gives very good reasons why Bitcoin's the king and will be the king. And a lot of the other altcoins or apps, I mean, not forget about the meme coins and all, because that's just complete and utter BS. Not that I won't trade them; I'll trade anything, you know, to try to make a dollar. But as far as I hate to use the word fundamentals, but fundamentally, I would say that Bitcoin would be the way to go.
Okay. Let's see. Um, Kind of moving on to a little bit of a different topic. In trading, there's a tremendous amount, unfortunately, of people that get into trading and fail. Why do you think that
Yeah.
is?
Well, there's a long answer to that. I've actually been working on a piece on that, and I've talked about it before. There's a couple of reasons. One reason is transference of knowledge, and in order to become successful as in any profession, there's a lot of education, there's a lot of experience. You don't. One example I often use is, let's say you want to be a pilot. You don't just go out and rent a plane and grab the yoke and like, I'm gonna figure out how to fly. Even if that was legal, you wouldn't be stupid enough to do it. You have to go to flight school or ground school, and then you go up with instructors, and eventually you get the yoke, and then of course you get it you get to fly by yourself. And any other profession, there's a career path, and the story that I often tell is one of my wife's friend's husband was a mortician, and then it's kind of a little morbid story here, but one day he was driving home on the Lake Pontchartrain Bridge, which at the time was the longest bridge in the world, and he had embalmed a child that day, and he's like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to become a plumber. I don't know why a plumber. Maybe he had some friends that could get him in as a helper or something. And about a year later, we called him up because we had a plumbing issue, and was like, he's like, Mike, can you give us a hand? He's like, well, you really need a licensed plumber for that. I'm like, well, you've been at it this a year. You're not licensed. Like, oh no, I'm a long ways away from that. You have to be a journeyman, and it could take 4 or 5 years to become a licensed plumber. Now, where I'm going with this, long story in this is, to be a trader, it's like, you wouldn't say, okay, I'm going to be a surgeon. I'm going to go buy some rags over the weekend. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to get some knives. I'm going to start cutting up people on Monday. It's a long, drawn out process. But to be a trader, you just need a computer. And then nowadays, you just need a cell phone. I see a lot of people just starting a cell phone. And then voila, you're a trader. And so the barrier to entry is so small that people don't realize where to go with it. Two more things. One, it's like early on, everybody goes on this crazy grill hunt. I think you could be successful, as Linda says, with just one pattern. All you need is one pattern to be successful. I think the Landry light pullback, it doesn't have to be my pattern. It could be some other kind of simple pattern would be a good pattern. But everybody, present company included, you go through all these indicators. You go on this grill hunt, you think you're going to find this great big epiphany or find something that really, really works, and you end up with a big analysis paralysis. So the grill hunt's another problem. And one thing I can never understand, and I would always ask the question out loud, and finally a psychiatrist who was a client called me up, or she actually emailed me and gave me the answer. It's like, why do people who want the best in life, and I've always say, doctors, lawyers, automatic transmission mechanics are probably too smart to be a trader, but why do these people who want the best in life, why do they take such mediocrity in the market? Why do they take such weak setups, or obviously not great setups? And one day she says, I think I have your answer. The doctor, the lawyer, the automatic transmission mechanic, they all have to take whatever train wreck comes along, knowing that in trying to help them, they might actually hurt them. So they can't sit around and wait for the so-called fat pitch. They can't wait for a car that's easy to fix, or a client would be easy to get off the hook legally, or whatever, or a patient, like a doctor.
Hmm.
Friend of mine, he sent me a picture of this woman's leg, which was completely black and looked like it was gangrene or something. And she comes in and is like, hey, my leg is messed up. It's like, well, if he began to operate on her, he could kill her. If he doesn't operate on her, then she would die. So
Yeah.
the point is, you're trained for years and years in your profession to take mediocrity, to take whatever comes along, And then you go into trading, it's like, well, I'm just going to take every setup that comes along, and that's the exact opposite of what you could do, what you should do.
How do you feel about 2025 in terms of the market? We've obviously had a very volatile start. Do you have any
Yeah,
expectations about kind of where we're going to go from here?
yeah, I have a hard time making these
Me
bigger
too.
picture predictions, but
Yeah,
I think everyone does. I'm kind of a short term guy,
for
but
sure. Yeah.
but I'm a trend following moron. So you look at that little Q position, and hopefully NBIS we've been in that for a month or so. I'm willing to hang out as long as a trend moves in my favor. So I'm a trend follower. I'm slightly optimistic, thinking that maybe the market. I think there's a lot of fear in the market right now. Maybe some of that will begin to come out of the market a little,
Hmm.
and we'll head higher. But internally, I'm very nervous. The leadership is very narrow. If you look at home builders and biotech, and there's all these different industries are headed lower. And about the only thing that's propping up the whole market right now is the mags, and they're getting a little weak here and there too. So where I am now is I'm very concerned. Things can change quickly. We're only about 2.5% away from all time highs. If
Hmm.
the indices can make it to all time highs and stay there, and you should never use the word hope, but what I would hope would happen is a lot of these weaker sectors begin to bottom out and improve. So that's the scenario I'm hoping for right now. I'm very nervous about the market, but a few big up days would certainly make a big difference as far as where we go. But you can't, again, all predictions are about the future, and a lot of stuff could happen between now and
Right.
then,
For sure.
as
But
we were
between
talking about
now and when the
earlier.
future is, yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I find you mentioned that you're a little optimistic and you try and check that out the door. I find that's something that I try to do as well because like I'm always like, well, yeah, things are going to go up. I think optimism though is a little bit rewarded long term in the market because the markets do have a general tendency to go up. However, you, I, I don't know. I try and check those emotions at the
Yeah.
door and try to remember things like let's let the market tell us what it's doing instead of trying
Yeah,
to kind of like
exactly. And I think there's some truth to what you're saying. Err a little bit on the long side of being mostly long, but then when the time comes, you if you have to short, you have to short. The shorting is very tough. You don't usually make a lot of money shorting. It seems like, oh well, my stocks are going down anyway. I'll just short. At least that's what I used to think. It's a little tougher than it looks. The retrace rallies, like we had the big rally yesterday, and a rally like that would just annihilate your shorts. And then if the market rolls right back over, then it's like you're stuck without a short position. But the reason I do recommend you learn how to short is because it helps you see the forest for the trees. I have friends that run a lot of money and they're long only oriented for whatever reason, they're charters or whatever, or maybe they just don't want to bother with the short side. But they always tend to see everything as glass half full. Whereas I
Mhm.
think if you're more of a trader type and you're willing to short, you could say, okay, well, this doesn't look good because this is actually a short setup here. And maybe instead of buying this market, I might want to be shorting it.
What do you
I know
do
I kind of
to
went
kind
around
of?
the block on that one too.
Hey, that's cool. That's fine. I enjoyed the answer.
Yeah,
I'll go
you
around
made
the
the
block with you all the time.
you
What do you
made the
do when
mistake
you're
of
not?
saying, "Hey, it's long form. Let's just chit chat."
Yeah,
So
I think it's going well. Uh, as long as, yeah. Anyway, what do you do when you're not trading?
my wife calls me hobby boy, and I'm always into something. I used to do a lot of sailing, and in more recent years, I've been doing a lot of woodworking, and I think it's very important to get out and clear your head and do something like that. So some of my best thinking is actually when I'm in the garage, sanding and sawing and things like that. And I'll actually go out in the woods and hunt down some wood and bring it in and dry it and cut it up and in some cases turn into a piece of furniture. So it's that's one of the things I'd recommend doing. I like to make things and build things. I guess I'm kind of a maker, tinker around and figure things out. And that's something. And I think it's important to do that kind of thing when you're not trading. You need to get away from your screens and do something else.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. Um, do you play any instruments?
I uh I've played guitar a little bit, but not enough to really you know, count
No,
that.
I
Do you
understand.
what do you play?
I play guitar, and I'm getting better. And
Yeah,
that just
it's
as long as you enjoy it, I wouldn't play in public. I think I'd just be embarrassed.
yeah,
But it's a lot of fun, actually, and as you get a little bit better, it's just like kind of one of those things like, you don't look to be like a superstar overnight. You just kind of
yeah.
incrementally improve, and
Yeah, it's just
uh,
it's very incremental, and you just get a little better and a little better. And that's what I often do is like when I'm speaking in person, I'll say any musicians in the group, and usually somebody will raise their hand. Obviously, law of averages,
mhm.
and I'm like, well, how did you get good? And they look at me, dumbass and bluff. I practiced. It's like okay, well, that's how you're going to get good with stocks. You're going to look at charts. I'm looking at a couple thousand charts a day, and that gives me a feel for what's going on internally, as opposed to just looking at the S&P 500 or Nasdaq or whatever, which I do look at too. I look at a lot of charts. That gives me a feel for things, and I think that's probably one of the best things you could do. And when you're looking at them, you need to keep. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. There's a couple. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this probably the most, and there's somebody else. It'll come to me in a second, but there's a Anderson, I believe is his name. But anyway, they talk a lot about deliberate practice, and that's what you could do in your guitar too. It's like you're not just messing around with it, although that's nothing wrong with that. But you're working to get better. You're trying to do a different riff or a harder riff or something or whatever the case may be, and that's what you need to do when you're looking at the charts. Don't just look at the charts, but look at the Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. I think talks a lot about deliberate practice. Would be a good book to read. But look
One
at
of the things,
look at the charts and say, okay, I see a big, huge move here. Could I have caught this pattern? Should I have caught this pattern? Are there one of my patterns there? Is there some newer pattern that I might be recognizing there? And then sometimes you just have to realize, as I often say, you can't kiss all the women. Sometimes a move would just happen with not a whole lot of rhyme or reason or a setup to it. So
I guess
deliberate
all the women.
practice, no matter what in life. And then Gladwell has the 10,000 hour rule, and that's not 10,000 hours of just banging on a keyboard, as he says in the book. That's working to get better.
Yeah.
And
One
so
of the
it's
things that
how
I
you
found,
practice.
I read this kind of in terms of iterative development, and I'm just kind of kick it in there real quick. It's actually the app that I'm using to learn to play the guitar. It says one of the things that it says is if you just practice 5 minutes a day, that's going to be better for you than practicing for an hour on Saturday. And I thought that was pretty
Ah,
interesting in terms of like you're just looking for you're looking to get a little bit better and you're looking to
yeah.
do that on a very consistent basis. I thought it
Yeah.
was
I mean,
cool.
you a couple of thoughts come to mind on that. It's like lately it seems like I'm later and later to getting to the gym, but I go every day. And I used to try working out and I tried Monday, then it was Tuesday, then it was Wednesday. Before you know, it's like Friday. I get the Friday workout in, maybe, and then I start the process over again. And then a couple of buddies of mine, right before COVID, they had a little makeshift gym in there in his bonus room or whatever you call it. And they invited me to work out with them. And I started, but they worked out every day, every day, every day, every day religiously.
Mhm.
And now I'm in that pattern, and I know myself because I think if I missed a day, other than the holiday or something, but if I missed a day, then the next day I wouldn't feel like going, and maybe keep missing days. So yeah, every day is important if you want to become good at guitar or trading or anything. I think it's day after day. And then Jeffrey, along the lines of what you were saying, somewhere I read that if you spend 18 minutes a day really focusing, probably deliberate practice on one thing, you would be better. And don't quote me exactly, but it's something like 95% of the people in the world. So if you work on that guitar for 18 solid minutes, uninterrupted, be serious about it, working hard to get better, you're going to be better than, believe it or not,
I believe it. Yeah, yeah. I
95%
totally
of the
believe you.
people in the world, not 95% of the professional musicians,
Sure,
but
sure.
most of the world. And that's kind of an amazing thing. And I keep every morning, in my notes that I write, one thing's like, I need to do this for 18 minutes, every day or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just one thing or the other.
So maybe
I never
next
get around to doing
year,
it.
maybe
With
by
that,
this time next year, I'll
yeah,
play us
yeah,
in.
yeah.
uh, um, I think that's it. Oh, one more thing. This is kind of a new thing that we've started. Um, I want you to leave a question for the next guest. What do you think this should be? What is a question I should ask the next guest.
What is the question?
I should ask the next person.
What's more important? Methodology, mind, trading psychology, obviously, or money management?
Okay, I'm a slow writer. I need to practice that brain thing that you're doing. And what is the answer that you would have? Psychology?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I often do a
I was
presentation where
actually just
I talk.
writing psychology right here. That's
Yeah,
all.
well,
Okay.
mind, mind, market, or money management. In mine would be in parentheses psychology.
Okay.
And then there's actually a little neurology in that now that I'm learning. I would recommend it that you learn a little bit about neurology. There's a couple of books out there. None come to mind. Well, I think it's Jason. What's his name? Jason Williams, Larry Williams' son. He's got a
Oh,
book
okay.
that talks a little bit about the not so much neurology, but like the taking a personality test, getting to know yourself. Which I'm trying to think of. Denise Scholl has talked a little bit about neurology, and there's a few other ones out there. But there's a general. If you learn a little bit about the neurology, I think that's important too. What were we talking about
Maverick.
earlier? Like the practice. The question. Okay. I often give a yes,
I
through the
love
weeds.
this.
I often talk about how the mind and money management and the psychology, the mind, money management, and the methodology, it's like a three-stranded cord. If you get better at one, you get better at all.
Mhm.
So if you get your head on straight through your morning pages, through your deliver practice and everything else, then you're going to be in a better mindset to take the trade when it comes along. If you work really hard on just one pattern, especially if you're newer to trading, just do the Landry light pullbacks, or it doesn't have to be that, but do whatever you want. But pick one pattern and get really good at it and play devil's
Right.
advocates and find some crappy setups that didn't work and find some ones that just you absolutely would have put in money with. Study the market conditions during that time. Just study the heck out of it. A lot of times I'll say something like, "Well, that's kind of neat. Where'd you learn how to do that?" It's like I read it this morning in a book. I'm like, "Oh, great. That's not going to work." So let's say you do get better at recognizing those patterns and you're confident in it, then you're more likely mentally to take that next trade when you see it. If you're using proper money management, you're taking profits and you're getting out of the stinkers when you have to, then again, that kind of improves your mentality. So they're all intertwined. If you improve on one, you improve on all. So I think it's vitally important that you work on all three of those things.
Dave, I'm actually like that question so much I'm gonna put it up as a poll question later.
Well, thank you. Thank
we
you. Yeah,
we
I'm like,
have a
oh, I need a question. It's
and
like that just came to mind.
it's perfect because it's like multiple choice too. We do have some answers though. Maverick says money management. Diane says all of the above. So we have some
Yeah,
answers. So I think for me, it's all of the above as well. But I do
yeah,
think money management is super important. Like a lot of one of the things that stood out to me over the years is I think it was Robert Deal. Um, we were doing some lessons with him, and he said, you can win 9 out of 10 trades and still lose every single dollar you have on your 10th trade.
yeah. Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
in any case, okay.
Well, and the other
Greg
thing
says,
too, let's say you're risking a very, and that's what another thing I tell people too. You're just starting out, trade at a size that's almost ridiculously small, and I'll say that I often say it. Sounds a little crazy. I'm sure your financial advisor would tell you you're crazy, but if you want to learn how to trade crypto. Just put
Mhm.
$100 and make sure you have some money management. Stop out at a $20 loss or whatever, and you get those reps in and get used to it and get used to getting. Not that you want to get stopped out, but get used to getting stopped out. Get used to making a little money, and then if you could do this, then slowly increase your size over time.
Maverick, I love what you just said in here. Trading is risk management and money management. If you're not systematically saving money and accumulating and managing money outside of trading, you'll have a hard time being successful.
Well said.
Um, all right. Greg says fantastic ticker talk, super informative. Dave, you did a
Thank
great job. I really appreciate your being in here and kind of spending some time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
DaveLandry.com. Let's see, www.davelandry.com if you want to kind of visit Dave's website. If you want to follow him, he's the T following moron, which means the trend following moron on Twitter. And then you can also email him at dave@davelandry.com. Any final thoughts?
I guess the trend is your friend, and spend some time,
Yeah.
as we just kind of alluded to. Spend a
I
lot of
looked
time working on.
everywhere for that
What's
business
that?
card that said uptrend, downtrend, and side trend.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't find it. So next time I see you, you should give me another copy of it.
I'll be happy to. So, but thank you so much. I appreciate you having me here. Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks everybody. Stay healthy. Stay well. We'll see you again soon.